An entire nation has spent decades concealing a fundamental truth. Now the numbers are catching up. The data once treated as reliable, stable, and predictable is unraveling like a house of cards. And this is a truly frightening part. This isn't just a problem of math or statistics. It's a systemic crisis. One that exposes a government's deepest fear, that the people it believe it controlled are slipping beyond its grasp. Because when the numbers stop lying, the truth becomes impossible to contain. And that truth is about to change everything.
Since I talked to you last, there seems to be this reckoning that's going on in the statistical community I said Canada. Where'd that come from? Sorry. You picked me up right after doing another project in China. The issue appears to be that they now believe, the statisticians now believe that the local and regional governments have been lying about their demographic data for over 25 years. And so let me back up. After Tiananmen Square, 10,000 people killed by tanks in downtown Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party is like, well, that was no fun whatsoever. Let's try to not ever have to do that again. One of the ways we're going to make sure that happens is we discovered that, there were kind of two kinds of protesters. You had the white collar workers that just made signs and they were really easy to run over with tanks. And then you had the ones that were kind of scary that brought wrenches and guns. So you had white collar and you had blue collar. So why don't we move our entire economy from a blue collar economy to a white collar economy? Problem solved, because white collar folks live in high-rise apartments. You can cut off their water. You can bolt them into their house. There's lots of ways you can deal with white collar protesters. Blue collar, a little different.
Zeihan warns that China's demographic data has been systematically distorted for decades, and now reality is breaking through, forcing a brutal reckoning. He argues that the government's shift from an industrial, blue-collar workforce to a white-collar society was never genuine economic progress, but a calculated strategy to preserve political control. Now, with the population aging rapidly and growth stalling, China's future stability is under direct threat, and the consequences are about to spill far beyond its borders. As Zhang's warning lingers, you can sense the ground shifting beneath the world itself, not just in China, but across the entire geopolitical map. When the foundation of a superpower begins to crack, every nearby structure starts to shake. That tremor is already being felt in the Middle East, in Taiwan, in Japan, and all the way to Canada. The next storm isn't coming from a single direction. It's coming from everywhere at once. What follows may be the most dangerous convergence of trade, technology, and geopolitics the world has seen in decades. For years, the world has fixated on the Middle East. But now the spotlight has narrowed to one of its most fragile fault lines, Iran. And once you grasp how deeply Iran's stability is intertwined with China's survival, it becomes clear why Beijing is watching every development like a man staring at a lit match in a dry room. President Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on any country doing business with Iran is not just a tariff. It's a sledgehammer aimed at the global economy, with the potential to ignite a new wave of trade war tensions, especially with China. The announcement was neither subtle nor nuanced. It was a blunt declaration delivered in a single chilling sentence. Any country doing business with Iran will face a 25% tariff on all U.S. trade, effective immediately. No clarity, no boundaries, no exemptions. Just a threat so sweeping that governments, investors, and traders were left scrambling to decipher what comes next. And that uncertainty is the weapon. When you don't know what will be punished, you can't plan, hedge, or adapt. That's why China is watching this crisis with wide eyes and racing minds. This threat doesn't just challenge China's economy. It challenges its ability to function as a global superpower. The reason is simple. China is the world's largest buyer of Iranian oil. Despite sanctions, it absorbs nearly 90% of Iran's exports through red-flagged shipments and opaque supply chains designed to evade Western controls. This is no side relationship. It's a lifeline, the energy source that keeps China's vast manufacturing engine running. China is also the world's largest crude refiner, consuming energy on a scale that dwarfs most nations. Roughly 14% of its oil imports come from Iran, a figure many analysts believe is understated due to disguised flows. These aren't marginal volumes. They are the backbone of China's industrial system. And those Iranian barrels aren't just oil, they're discounted oil. The kind that keeps China's private teapot refineries alive, operating on razor-thin margins. These facilities depend on cheap Iranian crude to survive. Without it, they would collapse, taking a significant portion of China's domestic energy infrastructure with them. The dependency doesn't stop there. Iran is also a major supplier of fuel oil and liquefied petroleum gas, accounting for nearly a quarter of China's LPG imports. This feeds China's massive plastics and petrochemical industries. Remove that supply and factories stall, production slows, and economic momentum grinds to a halt. If Iranian exports are disrupted, or if Gulf shipping routes are threatened, Beijing has no quick alternatives. The short-term options are limited. The impact would be immediate and severe. The Middle East has ignited before, but China has never faced a regional crisis that strikes so directly at the core of its economy. Now, rising tensions around Iran are pushing risks into Asian energy markets, leaving China exposed like never before. Markets have reacted oddly. Oil prices have largely shrugged off the threat. For now, analysts say prices will only spike if the U.S. takes the next step and physically disrupts Iranian shipments, such as seizing tankers. That would be the moment the region truly erupts. Whether Trump follows through remains uncertain. But the threat alone is enough to fracture the fragile truce that had begun to form between Washington and Beijing. Last year, the two sides reached an agreement that eased tariffs, cutting the average U.S. tariff rate on Chinese exports from over 40% to around 30.8%. It also secured U.S. access to Chinese rare earth supplies, a strategic win for Washington. Now all of that is at risk. Iran-linked penalties could unravel the deal entirely and complicate Trump's planned visit to Beijing later this year. What was meant to calm the storm may be torn apart by a single, sudden twist. China's already pushed back. The foreign ministry says it will defend its rights and interests, while the Chinese embassy in Washington has condemned the move as coercive, promising all necessary measures. Beijing argues that trade between third countries and Iran does not constitute a U.S. national security issue, directly challenging the logic behind the tariffs. But this is no longer just an argument. It's a global showdown. Iran is not merely a country. It's a strategic axis linking energy, geopolitics, and global trade. Disrupt it, and shockwaves ripple across the world. That's why this crisis terrifies China. It's not facing a trade dispute. It's facing the possibility that its energy lifeline could be severed. And while the world focuses on Iran, Washington is moving on another front that strikes at the heart of China's global dominance: semiconductors. The Trump administration is nearing a trade deal with Taiwan that would reduce tariffs on Taiwanese goods from 20% to 15%, aligning Taiwan with Japan and South Korea. In exchange, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the world's leading producer of advanced chips critical to artificial intelligence, would commit to building at least 4 additional fabs in Arizona. That means more chip production on U.S. soil, more advanced technology under American control, deeper reliance on Taiwan and less on China. TSMC already has 6 factories and 2 advanced packaging facilities pledged in Arizona. Total U.S. investment could exceed $165 billion, with individual cutting-edge fabs costing more than $20 billion each. New commitments could push spending toward or beyond $100 billion, stretching well into the 2030s. This isn't just business. It's a strategic realignment of the global supply chain, happening in full view of Beijing. Taiwan's trade office says both sides have reached broad consensus, with a framework agreement potentially announced soon. For Taipei, the deal brings tariff relief at a sensitive political moment. For Trump, it delivers another headline-grabbing investment pledge supporting his argument that tariffs can bring manufacturing home. But for Beijing, which claims Taiwan as its own territory, the move is deeply provocative, especially as Trump's visit to China looms. The pressure doesn't end there. Japan is being pulled into the vortex as China tightens controls on rare earth and dual-use mineral exports. Licenses are harder to obtain, inspections are more intense, and deliveries increasingly sporadic. Shipments are approved mainly when materials are processed in Japan and re-exported to the U.S. or sent to a narrow list of favored firms. Chinese officials frame the restrictions as security measures, citing Japan's rise in defense budget and rhetoric linking Taiwan's security to Japan's own. But the controls extend well beyond defense, hitting private industry and underscoring how aggressively Beijing is willing to weaponize trade. Japan is responding by accelerating efforts to reduce dependence on China, building alternative supply chains with the U.S. and Europe, and investing in rare earth extraction near Marcus Island. Australia has launched a strategic critical minerals reserve. The message is unmistakable. Rare earths are no longer just materials. They are geopolitical leverage. And then there's Canada. China has shown unusual enthusiasm ahead of Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing, framing it as an opportunity to reset strained relations and hinting that Ottawa may be reassessing its alignment with Washington. Many Canadian analysts remain skeptical. They point to national security risks, coercive trade practices, and deindustrialization, arguing that a return to normal trade is unrealistic under China's state-driven economic model. As the joke goes, win-win usually means China wins twice. Still, the visit carries leverage. Beijing may see Canada as vulnerable under U.S. pressure, while Ottawa can test how far China is willing to go and what concessions it might offer. The reality is this: China isn't just watching the Iran crisis, it's watching everything. Trade, energy, technology, and geopolitics are no longer moving in separate lanes. They are merging into a single, unstoppable storm, and China is standing at its center. The next phase of global conflict won't be fought with tanks or missiles. It will be fought with tariffs, supply chains, and energy pipelines. And if China miscalculates, the fallout could be catastrophic.